Hey, it's Max. Watch through till the end to catch our top 5 cards, traps, sleepers, VIPs, and contenders from our experiences in early access. Lost Caverns of Ixalan. So, how did Wilds of Eldraine Standard end? What shakeups can we expect with Ixalan arriving in just a matter of days? And are Ixalan's gods powerful deities or merely missed opportunities? Like this video and subscribe so you can find out the answers to these questions and more as we enter the Lost Caverns of Ixalan era.
It only matters if it ladders. Comment below as we wrap up our final chapter in Wilds of Eldraine Standard and talk about our early access testing in Ixalan. Let's get to it. Alright, welcome to the end of Wild Standard. As you can see, Golgari Aggro, Esper Midrange, Domain, and Azorius Soldiers all finished at the top tier, cementing their dominance across more than 10 weeks of play.
In Tier 2, we see Blue Djinn, Esper Control picking up late top 8s to merit their inclusion, as really they've bounced in and out of this category all season.
But the real fun can be found in our new brews, featuring a ton of archetypes that we used in early access.
This time around, we'll bridge the gap between Wilds and Ixalan Standard, so without further ado, let's talk through Domain.
Alrighty, so Seth Manfield piloted Domain to a trophy in the Ultimate Guard Content Creator Charity Tournament this past weekend, but Gian Hunter also snagged an MTGO Challenge trophy with it, and Jabberwocky pulled a top 8 as well. So Domain continues to dominate the conversation as we look at Ixalan Standard, and it shows no signs of relenting.
Alright, so what new cards from Ixalan should we try in this deck?
Well, I think first and foremost, you look at a list like this and you think, Mirex, do we still need it? Can we replace it with Cavern of Souls? We've been talking about this for basically a month at this point, but Cavern of Souls does allow Atraxa to hit, does allow Archangel to hit. That's nice. I mean, the ability, I honestly don't think the Atraxa is actually as critical as the Archangel. Making sure you get that through Azorius Soldiers and their early counter spells to make sure that you shore up what they're doing and or blow out two of their better creatures, like a Harbin. I think that's critical. The other card we may want to consider is if we want to shift from this black focus over to more of a white focus, so it's more green-white, we could look at shifting out Go for the Throat and maybe even Virtue of Persistence for Get Lost, because it is a versatile piece of removal that might just fit the ticket for this. That said, not even close to sure on that one.
Right, and Get Lost is definitely a tempting card because of the wide range of permanents that are popular permanents right now that it hits. So I understand that. Okay. Talk to us now about Azorius Soldiers.
Differencias made a finals appearance with this list of soldiers in the most recent MTGO challenge, reminding everyone that Cavern of Souls wasn't around this past week still. Now, I don't know exactly how to pronounce this, but it's OVML Cabrera made it to the finals of the other MTGO challenge as well, cementing soldiers as Tier 1 yet again while we close out the season.
Wow, and again, what new cards from this new set can we expect to try out in this deck?
So I think there are three potentials here. Like first, we have Get Lost. Yet again, this card, I don't know the power level of. It's hard to say because our map tokens relevant is going to be a big part of the discussion with Ixalan, and Get Lost will be fundamental to that discussion. What I do know is that having a 2-mana piece of hard removal that can just be instant speed with a tempo deck is huge sometimes. The other two cards would be Kutzil's Flanker, which is just kind of your anti-Sunfall tech. If you can't counter Sunfall, you can still get a giant creature out of it, while also giving you a versatile piece that removes graveyards, something that Azorius Soldiers historically has struggled to deal with. And last but not least, we have Malcolm Alluring Scoundrel. I doubt this is correct, but if we go into like that blue-white Flash Flyers tempo game, and we kind of start to eschew more of the Soldiers build, that's where Malcolm Alluring Scoundrel starts to look really good.
Okay, yeah. You might want to possibly shift Harbin out for that card. I don't know if it's a... What do you think about that balance between Harbin and Malcolm? Which would you pick for the deck?
Well, the question with Soldiers is, will it be a Soldiers deck in the end? Or is it a blue-white tempo deck that happens to have Soldiers? And where that balance is will dictate which ones you're going to play.
Yeah, certainly, and that would definitely track with the deck's evolution over the past few weeks. So talk to us now about Esper Midrange.
2 copies made it to the top 4 of last Saturday's MTGO Challenge, and then another 3 copies made it into the top 8 of Sunday's MTGO Challenge. Now, it hasn't taken a trophy in a while. but the deck just keeps putting up results and forcing the entire format to warp around its presence, which makes it a tier 1 finisher for Wilds of Eldraine Standard.
All right, what can we add to this deck to make it even spicier?
So I think there are 2 cards I really want to consider. Yet again, we're going to have this discussion with Get Lost. I know I keep saying it. It's that good. It's that relevant. Instant speed removal. We've seen how long Go for the Throat has been relevant. Get Lost falls into a similar category, potentially. We still need some more time to test out map tokens and how relevant they are. But Sanguine Evangelist is another card I really want to consider for the fact that it does a good job if we push this more towards a tokens build, where we're like, okay, we need Wedding Announcement, Virtue of Loyalty, and Rafine to be the key points, and we want more tokens. Battlecry starts to look really good, as do flying tokens, because you start deading your opponent's ability to interact with you via Fairy Mastermind while simultaneously putting up a ton of pressure.
Absolutely. Evangelist, I believe, is a 3-drop creature. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you think that'll compete with Skitter?
Heavily, and that's kind of that's the conundrum, because like you're not playing it over Rafine, you're not playing it over Wedding Announcement probably, no. But you know, can it compete with Lord Skitter, or do you just load up the 3-drop slot even more and start eschewing things like Urtai and saying we don't need to go into the 4-drops as much, let's play 12 or maybe even 13 3-drops? I get that that's clunky, but sometimes you do want to go that route if you're just trying to push a specific strategy in mind, and you treat it as if it's a 4-drop in that scenario.
Talk to us about the final deck in our tier 1 list, Golgari Aggro.
So Christiel, and again, I'm sorry if I butcher names, it's hard to tell with these online ones, took down an MTGO challenge with Golgari, with another 2 claiming top 8 slots over the past weekend, cementing its spot as a tier 1 deck despite massive struggles with Domain over the past few months.
And so where do you see this deck evolving, considering that and the new set?
I think this deck has 3 cards out of the new set that I'm excited to try in it. The first one is going to be Sentinel of the Nameless City. This is a value engine in the 3-drop that blockades the ground and has vigilance to obsolete opposing Wandering Emperors. It also really lets us test out, are map tokens relevant? Do they matter at all? If so, how much? But the fact that it kind of just deads all these Graveyard Trespassers, Lord Skitters, most of the aggro, and it makes mono red hates that card. A 3/4 with Vigilance, mono red hates that card. So there's a lot to be said for that. Glimpse the Core is the second one, and I think that's interesting if we go into like this big turtle ramp into Shellies and Breaches and Virtue of Persistence and Nissas. Like if we're going big, Glimpse the Core seems like it's ideally positioned to push us there. And let's not forget that minus on Nissa counts forests, which Glimpse will fetch for you. So you are bumping up your Nissa power as you're using those. That's not a small thing as the game goes on in those mid-range mirrors. The final card I want to talk about is Ozir Kaslam, Deepest Growth. Again, sorry if I butcher these. It's grindy, it's sticky, it gets down there with, it does exactly what Golgari Aggro is trying to do. It's a 6/5 that they have to answer. If they don't, it just starts crapping value out of the top of your deck onto the battlefield. And if they answer it, half the time you just go, okay, anyway, turn it back. Just turn it back on. You can't go for the throat reliably against Golgari. So you have to have exile-based removal to deal with it.
All right, that concludes our tier 1 list. Let's drop down into tier 2, and I will kick things off by talking about Esper Control. Dumenstein snagged a top 4 finish in Sunday's MTGO challenge last week, making it 3 weeks straight. Esper Control has snagged a top 4 finish, but unfortunately gone no further, thus kind of sealing its spot in tier 2 territory.
Yeah, so Max, again, we look at these, we're trying to figure out what matches from Ixalan, where can we make improvements, where can we shift things, what do you like out of Ixalan for this deck?
So again, I don't want to be a dead horse, but Get Lost is in this discussion as well, especially in the control version of Esper, for the reasons that we've already stated. And again, map tokens, are they relevant or not? Also, Confounding Riddle, which has the 2 modes, which makes it a counter spell that even when something like Cavern of Souls hits, still has relevance after that with the second mode, where you're able to basically dig. Tishana's Tidebinder is another card as well, and I really like this card because it shuts down one of the more popular cards in the format right now, which is the Waifu. Flash speed, counter that ability, probably one of the best ways to shut down Waifu in my opinion. And then I just want to mention 2 more. We do have another piece of 2-mana removal in Bitter Triumph. More removal, especially in the 2-drop slot, able to destroy any creature, not just a smaller creature or some of the limitations you see with 2-drop removal in the past. And then O'Hare Bakbatik, Deepest Epoch. I just want to bring up. I know it's just the only one of the gods of Ixalan that are really relevant to these discussions. I think it's the most powerful one, in my opinion. The recursive ability to come back, but also better than Lear. And we remember how many decks were running Lear back in the day, like with Jeskai, Sultai, several decks, and you still get to counter spells. So, cheaper card, better than Lear. I think it's worth at least a look.
Fair, and that'll bring us to our other tier 2 list here, Mono Blue Djinn.
All right, Mono Blue Djinn. Gosh, I know some people do not like seeing this deck succeed, but nonetheless, it snuck back into Tier 2 land on the back of a top 8 finish by Poker Wizard this past Saturday.
So, again, we look at a deck like this. Cavern of Souls is coming in. Counter spells might be less relevant. Can this deck survive in that world?
I do believe so. I think it becomes relevant again because let's talk about Confounding Riddle, right? Confounding Riddle, the 2 modes. I think that's still useful even beyond Cavern of Souls. So you have where the card still has value despite Cavern of Souls being the big threat coming in. Eaten by Piranhas, enchantment removal piece. That kind of reminds me of that Witness card that's also in blue. Makes something a 1/1 black skeleton, takes away abilities. Great target for Sheldred. Also enchantment, so it's hard to remove. We have Malcolm, Alluring Scoundrel. That's also a possibility here, which can allow you to really push cards into your graveyard, like spells into your graveyard, and even faster pace. And then I also want to bring up, we talked about Tishana's Tidebinder for the same reason. I think that card could work. Out of Air is another counterspell removal piece that kind of acts like an Essence Scatter if it's targeting a creature spell. But nonetheless, I think because it can target all spells in the 4-mana mode, I think it still has some relevance, again, after Cavern of Souls lands on the battlefield. So I just... And let me mention just one more. Hurl into History also does some tempo things as well, but also adds to your board state in addition to that. So you really get some value out of that card as well. So a number of cards. I know I just listed quite a few, but I think Blue's going to come back, and I think the Brewers are going to be looking at Blue as a huge possibility to counter the domain meta.
Well, speaking of Brewers, it's time for Brewers Corner. Now, everybody, I'm aware this is going to look a little bit different because we don't quite have Ixalan on our computers available for us to use through Arena, so we're on Moxfield for this one. But let's kick off Brewers Corner, and let's talk a little bit about Rakdos Goblins. Okay, so played this, did all right with it. I think I ended up going like 3-0 with it before we moved on to other lists and early access. There's a few things that are worth noting. First, Breaches is kind of insane. I did not realize this card would be that good. This card is really good. The ability to just make their best creature not be able to block allows you to push through so many board states. And the fact is, you have the Goblin Tomb Raider as a pirate as well, so you can get double triggers on this, and that'll happen more often than you think. I will say that new black rare goblin is a trap, the Stalactite Stalker. It's just not good. I tried so many ways to make that card good. It was always a trap. Just play Picnic Ruiner and understand that Picnic Ruiner plus Mirren Bane Splitter is 8 damage. It's just a better way to go. The new Flail, Dire Flail, also great. Makes Picnic Ruiner a nightmare for everyone else to deal with as well. The problem with this deck, I think, fundamentally, is that it dies to temporary lockdown. Like, this is way too linear of a game plan, and we need some better goblins. Like, we need Goblin Piledriver back. I'm really sad they didn't reprint it, because people are going to keep on pushing Path of Perils, temporary lockdowns, and other things because of Soldiers, which means that we get a lot of side hate for this deck, and I just I don't see a path through that currently. If I'm wrong, and I hope I am, please let me know in the comments below.
Yeah. I can't. I'm starting to try to think of what this deck could use to sort of counteract that, but I'm really coming up blank. You don't really want to shift into like duresses, things like that, because that really slows down what it's trying to do, right?
Right, exactly the problem we have. All right, let's move it on, and Max, tell us a little bit about Gruul Dinosaurs.
So I got to play this deck during early access quite a bit, and I have to say, the multiple angles of attack really make it a deck worth looking at, especially in light of some of the strong dinos that they printed. I do want to highlight Belligerent Yearling as one that I think just really deserves a spot in here. There were so many times where I played that and then curved right into Pugnacious Hammer Skull, and that's a 6/6 with Trample right there. So there were a lot of times where it was high damage enough to really overrun the opponent, so I like it. Cavern of Souls also shuts down the counterspell game. We're going to talk about that card a lot, and it's relevant to this deck as well. Some of the problems with the deck is it really, despite having green in it, doesn't have much card advantage. I think they've really taken that sub-archetype away from green in recent sets. And every card gets hit by easy removal. There's more removal now in this set with like Get Lost, Bitter Triumph, but Throat Goats dominate when they come out and just, pick the deck apart, different pieces. And for the same reason that we advised Golgari players not to do, I think this deck also you don't want to use to try to race Domain, which, is just going to be much more efficient at ramping and getting to their 7 drops. So not a ton of removal as well. There are some fight-based cards that you can kind of slot in. One that I used instead of Tail Swipe was the Glyph, the Battle Glyph, the 1-drop Battle Glyph, which has the added advantage. It's sorcery speed, but if you do it on your turn, you get a 1/1 counter instead of the temporary 1/1 until end of turn. So I don't know whether I like it better or not, but they definitely give you some options.
Fair. Let's move over to our third Kindred deck and talk a little bit about Mardu Vampires. Now, I had a lot of fun building this list. I changed a lot of it during early access. I can say 2 things. One, Markov Baron feels insane in this list. Like, we have 12 1-drops. There are a number of games where you go like Cutthroat Contender into Pit Fighter Epicure, Convoke the Baron, go, and then they play their second land. And you've got so much power on the board already. Like, it's kind of wild how quickly this deck can get out of control if you don't check it. Dominating Vampire, I tried playing this as a 4 of. It's a 2 of. Don't play 4 of. It's you can't have extra copies in your hand. It does not help. But having like 1 or 2 of as a Miser's copy works amazingly. The reason I think this is possible is because Sanguine Evangelist was printed. Sanguine Evangelist puts the clock of this and just dials it up to 11. And it kind of acts as a mini pseudo-lord in conjunction with Baron and Vampire Socialite to just push that power and make these creatures that are just, Savannah lines at best a little bit better, and then a little bit better, and then they push right through. That said, the entire deck's probably losing to Brotherhood's End. So not a great place to be when Path of Peril, Brotherhood's End. These are cards that not only concern you, but like actively end the game for you. It's probably tier 2, but if everybody ignores it and goes bigger, this can slide under Domain and actually ruin it.
Yeah, and I just want to comment real quick that, again, the side hate. Azorius Soldiers is making it tough on everybody to run these, like, low-to-the-ground Kindred decks, right?
Yeah. Let's push over, though. Let's talk a little bit about Rakdos Reanimator. Max, what do we got?
All right. One of my favorite archetypes in all sets, in all formats. Cruelty of Gix is still a good card. I have to say, and I want to make a note. We've said this in the past, that this card can steal an Atraxa from your Domain opponent. So as well as also contending with other Reanimator strategies. Geological Appraiser, I think Red needed this card. It gives you some value, especially in this deck where you can pull, Ironcrag, Celestis, Blood Tithe Harvester. You can bring in some value when you play that card. And then, of course, I also want to say that this deck is viable in light of the lack of graveyard hate. I don't think there's enough graveyard hate out there actually getting play, so the core of the deck seems to be quite strong. Some of the problems with the deck, however, lack of exile-based removal, right? It's not playing white, so you're not going to see a whole lot of that. Also, a lack of enchantment removal in light of the fact that Wilds of Eldraine really pushed enchantments. Not enough of removal for that, so you'll be surprised by Up the Beanstalk decks and other things like Domain.
Yeah, it's got some weak points. It definitely performed well for me during early access, but I know exactly what you mean. Like, there's no good enchantment removal in Red and Black, and Invoke Despair is banned, which was our best version of enchantment removal. And that's it. Oh, like, yeah. That was the whole enchilada for us for a long time. But let's move over. Let's talk about a list from Boros. Now, this one's brought to us by Athena the Bun. Thank you so much for sending it my way. She watched like literally every early access stream yesterday. Shout out for that as well. But she went through and kind of built a conglomeration based on a bunch of different people trying out Quintorius Cond archetypes. And she said this is what she really liked out of it. I love this list. It probably needs a little bit of work, but as a starting place, this is fantastic. Like, Quintorius is so insane if it sticks. It feels like a Teferi Hero of Dominaria in many ways, because it's coming out, it's doing something immediately, and then every turn they don't answer it, it's basically +1. Like, yes, it's only a creature, but have you seen how fast it gets out of control when you make a 3/2 every turn? Like, it just ding, creature, ding, like your Rafines don't matter that much all of a sudden. So I love it. The piece that I think she and I are both trying to figure out is, do you even need Pia Nalar, or is this just cut down bait that people are going to wreck? I don't know yet. I don't know yet, but it's got some potential on either side. So we'll find out. This needs some more tuning, but have some fun with it, guys. Check it out. See if you can figure it out. I'd love to know if anybody cracked the code. Just comment below and let us know. And that will bring us to our final segment here tonight. Predictions for the upcoming set release, which I believe, as we're taping this, is happening in a few hours. Max, we've looked at 11 archetypes tonight. What are your predictions going into week 1 of Ixalan Standard?
We finally made it. I was so excited for this set release, and early access was amazing. But, you know, despite my great early access experience, I even went as far as to say on social media that it was the most fun I've had during early access. A lot of great decks, a lot of great archetypes, a lot of great card interactions. Win or lose, I had a lot of fun. But my prediction, I have to say, is a little conservative this time. I predict that almost nothing is going to change by the first day of the meta that we have for this set, after set release. Same decks that we see in Tier 1 during Wilds will continue to be big winners, and I just haven't seen anything that's going to burst that bubble. Now, typically, Brewers are the first set of Magic players to try to break the meta established by the previous set. So you are going to see a lot of new lists, a lot of new archetypes, and a lot of new cards in those lists. If you're a brewer, by the way, feel free to check out and use any of the decks that we've talked about today just previously in the Brewer's Corner, and let us know how you would adjust and how they're performing for you. But for myself, I have different advice, and I often give this advice upon set releases. If you've heard this from me before, forgive me. But what I like to do is make small incremental changes, which is, based around the established archetypes that are already winning, and basically slowly work in the new solutions to the established meta. This is actually why we've decided to showcase the decks from the last cycle, while still including in our hot minutes what we did, what cards we thought you could brew and make the decks even spicier with. These decks need a lot of testing. These changes need a lot of testing. So for that reason, I say make incremental changes. In my opinion, the card that will have the most impact on Standard from this set will be Cavern of Souls. How much will decks like Domain give up in terms of slots or adjustments to be able to use this card efficiently and effectively? How much will this card affect the control and tempo decks that rely on countering creature spells? If Domain gets even stronger, maybe there will be a more or less immediate ban. I really wouldn't be surprised if all eyes are on Atraxa as the next card in Wizard sites to ban or restrict. But that's the view from my front porch. Rictus, where do you see things going? What cards do you think will have the biggest impact on Standard in the coming weeks?
So I'm going to do something a little bit different this time, Max. Instead of the typical meandering summary, I'm going to walk through top 5 lists with you to end the show. So let's start with the first one, which is top 5 cards out of the new set. Number 1 for me, Sanguine Evangelist. This card is great for aggro. It's great for sacrifice decks. It's got a lot of utility to work with. This card is a winner. I think it's going to be widely applicable in Standard. I can't wait to see where people mess with it. Number 2, Breach's Eager Pillager. Red-based aggro decks are going to potentially want this. It's got a lot to offer. Goblin decks will absolutely auto-include it, but I do think mono-red as a whole is going to take a look at this and start to reevaluate it, because a 3/3 with first strike and relevant triggered abilities, including clearing out blockers, is a big deal for them. Third, Trumpeting Carnosaur. If any card makes dinos actually viable, it's because this one was printed. The fact that you have early ways to discard it and deal with threats, and then you have later game plays where it's just straight value plus a giant-ass body, this card's good. If anything makes dinos viable, it will be this. Number 4, Cavern of Souls. If anything makes a single kindred archetype shine over 2 to 3 color, like, good stuff, it'll be Cavern of Souls. And last but not least, Quintorius Kond. Time will tell, but in the right deck, this card just seems so absurd. There's so much card advantage, it moves so quickly, and if you have just a little bit of synergy with it, I think you'll be surprised how fast things get out of control for you.
Yeah, and for you guys, I have the top 5 key role players in the set. The first one I want to mention is Glimpse the Core, giving ramp decks a 2-drop to ramp with, which is something that they desperately needed. Second, Geological Appraiser, we already mentioned it, but red finally gets a value creature for mid-range lists. Third, we have Ixalan's Lore Keeper. If Dinos is viable, they basically get a Llanowar Elf, and they're the only kindred that has that. So that card will play a huge role. Bartolome, Vamps decks, Sack decks in general are going to be possible now because of this ungated Sack Pump. And then lastly, Get Lost, which we keep mentioning, but I really do think that this is going to play a key role in some of the decks, especially the mid-range decks. Instant speed removal. It really takes over and usurps Destroy Evil's limited role at doing that.
Fair, and we've seen Destroy Evil make a 1 or 2 of in the main board lately for a lot of different lists, so I'm kind of intrigued to see if it shifts over to Get Lost because of the fact that it hits most of the same stuff and then a little bit more on top of that. Again, it'll come down to those map tokens that we just need to figure out how strong that is. But let's move on to the top 5 traps in the new set, and I'm going to give credit here to Athena the Bun again. She went through and did a ton of analysis for us on the back end and sent over a bunch of notes this morning, and I agreed with like 99% of them. She did a fantastic job. So first and foremost, Descend decks. Graveyard Hate has never been more incidental or powerful, and this is not the time to go all in on graveyard strategies. I watched a ton of people try to play Ancient One strategies, Chupacabras, Terror Tide, Souls of the Lost. You can get a game in here and there, but if you think you're getting through BO3 play with those, I highly doubt it.
Yeah.
I highly doubt it.
Yeah.
I mean, Tranquil Frillback is seeing a lot of play, and it just exiles your whole graveyard and resets you at 4 mana. It's not a good place to be. Number 2, Fight Rigging decks. I know you want to play Ancient One into Fight Rigging, and it sounds great until you realize the payoff isn't going to win you the game because of the way you have to design the deck. This has been the problem with Fight Rigging decks, that they get clunky. Like, you have to set up the combo, and that takes so much effort that the payoff should be a win, and yet the payoff is usually just one more clunky piece from the Fight Rigging. So I haven't seen a good enough combo to justify Fight Rigging decks, no matter how excellent it sounds to play Ancient One into it. Number 3, Merfolk, Pirates. Not enough love in the new set.
Say it so.
Yep, these kindred archetypes are underpowered. I'm sorry. They tried. They failed. They didn't give you enough love. Number 4, Cave decks. Also underpowered. Domain will run right through you. I don't see a way that Cave decks are stronger than Domain. And there's definitely not counters to deal with Domain in that archetype. And last but not least, tokens. Farewell still exists. The end of discussion right there. Like, Farewell exists. I don't want to play tokens when Farewell exists. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Same reason you don't play Selesnya Enchantment right now either.
Right. 3 Farewells in the sideboard of all those domain lists. No, thank you.
Yeah. All right. And I have for you the top 5 sleepers in Ixalan. We'll start with Thousand Moon Smithy. This effect is powerful. Let's just be forthright about that. But we really haven't found the right build to break it just yet. So, Brewers, be aware of this card. Second, we have Veto. Man, Veto being back. I know some serious Veto fans that are happy about that. If the right sack shell is found, this card is going to be slotted right in and will likely be the reason it works. Third, Kutzil, the Malamet Exemplar. If a Selesnya or Abzan counters deck works, likewise, it will also be because of this card there to serve as the engine for it. And then Bonehorde Dracosaur doesn't slot easily into any of the tier 1 lists, unfortunately. But you gotta imagine, with a card this powerful and this absurd, that it's gonna go somewhere. It can single-handedly grind through any deck given a few turns, and I actually experienced this in Limited during early access. And then lastly, the Skullspore Nexus. Dinos plus the Skullspore Nexus. Come on, y'all. Who doesn't want to brew that? Who didn't think that when they saw this card? Grindfest duo.
Yep, I got to experience that exact scenario going against Dinos in early access, where they played the 6/6, and then shortly thereafter the Skull Spore. So I'm like, okay, we'll kill the 6/6, and they're like, anyway, here's another 6/6, and I'm like, oh, okay, what the hell are we doing about this now? There's it's every removal spell has to be double removal spell. There's no favorable way to trade ever. Yeah, it was brutal, but we'll push it right along to the last top 5 list here. The top 5 new contending archetypes that are coming out of Ixalan worth considering. First and foremost, Gruul Dinos. I know it needs some tuning, but if any Kindred decks are likely to take a shot at the crown, I feel like it's this one. They push Dinos so hard, and it shows. You have the only Llanowar Elf in the set. You have a 6/6 at 3 mana. You have a mana dork that can literally replay your Dinos out of the graveyard. So if you discard those trumpeting Carnosaurs earlier, you'll just play them again later. And I got to do that. It felt very unfair. So Gruul Dinos, number 1. Number 2, Rakdos Reanimator, to which I only have to say, our Atraxa, comrade. Not your Atraxa, our Atraxa. Third on the list is Golgari Ramp, or also, when you Atraxa, I Atraxa, just like that.
Yeah.
When you Atraxa, I Breach, just like that. So,
nice.
Golgari Ramp, I think, does have a lot to be said for it. That's an archetype that is pretty unexplored, and now that we have Glimpse the Core and the ability to just go turn 2 Glimpse into turn 3 Turtle, we're getting really close to pushing into Breach quickly. So I do want to see where that archetype goes now that we have some more early ramp to go with it. Number 4 for new contenders is Mardu Anvil. There are 3 strong Orzhov cards being printed that all slot into a more mid-range iteration of this deck, and there's a chance that it's now legit. It also helps that the red god that's in these colors turns your Onicult Anvil into sledgehammers. It takes that 1 damage and turns it into 4 every time you ping. So if there's going to be a breakout god, and it's not the blue one, my money's on the red one in an Anvil deck. Finally, Boros Midrange. We covered this a little bit earlier with Athena the Buns build. Quintorius Khan is going to find a home somewhere. I think we start here, since the Cavern of Souls kind of semi-obsoletes the strategy of playing counters. The question is, can it compete with Domain? I don't know, but it's a contender potentially, so let's find out, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for those lists. Thank you to everybody who contributed. Now, I just want to take a minute and really thank the community, really for following us throughout this last set and commenting week after week to let us know exactly what you think of our content. Now, both Rictus and I have truly been humbled by the overwhelming support that this community has shown us. Please give this video a like. Comment below with any further suggestions, questions that you may have. We really do listen and respond to every single one. Don't hesitate to subscribe as well. We present weekly draft guides, a podcast, and these Stay the Meta videos so that you can feel empowered to compete. We also have a join button if you really want to show your support. It really has some great perks, emojis, created by our designer ICPJs. Shout out to ICPJs, and even a second tier now for just $3 a month if you want to access our sideboard notes.
Thank you again for being a part of this community and giving back. And until next time, untap, upkeep, resist.